So I'm Tina Kim. I'm a director of product management at Huckleberry. I have been at Huckleberry for the past 2.5 years. Prior to Huckleberry, I was at Comcast for 9 years, working as a product manager on the entertainment TV platform. I also worked on the home security product, and then I also worked on the internet product, all consumer-facing products. On the entertainment side, it was a technical platform product. But I do have a lot of experience and love for the consumer-facing product management space. So it's a little bit about me. Have to give a little spiel about my company, my current company, Huckleberry Labs. So how many guys have heard about Huckleberry? Anybody? Maybe some folks that I talked to today. So Huckleberry is a app based on, it's a parent app. It's an app used by parents to help their kids. You can track your sleep, your potty, your diaper, your feeding, all of that. The magic is in the data analysis that we do. We look for patterns in the sleep. We give sleep predictions. For those with more serious sleep problems, we have a premium plan, which gives you a detailed sleep plan, which gives you week-by-week guidance on how to address your sleep challenges. We also not only collect the data and show it to you in reports, but we look for the patterns and we highlight it, and then we surface the patterns to you so that you can see, oh, this is interesting, I should pay attention to this. We interpret it for you, and we give you recommendations on what to do with that data, as opposed to saying, here's all your data, you go figure it out. So very helpful for parents. We also launched a older kids app, which helps with your bedtime routine. It's called Magic Steps, if anyone is interested. So, A/B testing. So how many of you guys have done A/B testing before? Okay, so a lot of you guys, this will probably be more of a refresher. We'll go over basic real quick. What is A/B testing? Understanding the pros and cons of A/B testing. So, whether you want to do A/B testing for certain experiments, then how to set up an A/B experiment and test, and then common best practices and common pitfalls. And so for those who've already been doing A/B testing, again, it'll be probably like a good refresher. But maybe some of the pros and cons and pitfalls may be new to you. But I will share all of this as well as experiences of my own. Some of these pitfalls I learned through experience. And so let's get through it. So A/B testing, in its simplest form, it's just taking two different variants, a control group and a variant, and you're changing either an algorithm, a UI, a color on a button, adding a new feature, and you're basically testing it against a random distribution of users, and then measuring the output to see which one performs better. Now, a key thing is it has to be measurable, and so you would only want to A/B test something if you can indeed measure it. So, pros and cons of A/B testing. So a pro is avoiding making key important decisions based off of I think, I believe, I strongly feel, or avoiding the hippo, right? The highest paid person's opinion. And so a lot of times you come into these conversations and one person has one opinion, another person has another, and you end up going with whoever has like the highest paid position or the loudest voice. But with A/B testing, you can actually get a clear answer based off of the data. Like you don't have to rely on decisions made off of I believe. So another pro is you can easily measure the impact of a change in isolation. So as opposed to launching something and then measuring the results, there may be other factors coming into play. There may be some kind of seasonal promotion, or you may have launched another feature at the exact same time, or there may be some irregularity with seasonality, right? So with A/B testing, you have a clear control group and a variant, and that way you can measure one against the other to really know in isolation the impact of that change. So then what you can do is look at conversion rate, engagement rate, retention, and you measure that, the control against the variant. Another big pro of A/B testing is the risk mitigation. So I think it was in Brennan's presentation, if any of you guys saw it, that 50% of experiments fail, right? So the benefit of an A/B experiment is you're able to turn it off. If it's a failure, you turn it off. There's no need to do another code release, spend time trying to undo the work. You can test it and measure it and then make your final decision. So here is an example right here of where we actually did an experiment and it failed. You know, we had this hypothesis, it was worse. No problem, we just turned it off. But we were able to track it throughout the process and easily just flip a switch to turn it back off. So the other thing that what A/B testing allows you to do is to squash those endless debates about exact copy or exact color on a button or some UI element. In this particular screenshot here, we were testing a change where when users clicked on a paywall, when users clicked on a feature and they were given, they were brought to a feature-specific paywall where you cannot actually purchase from that paywall. Our hypothesis was users were not completing the purchase because the feature-specific upsell then took you after another click to the paywall. So in this example, we just said, hey, why don't we take out that additional step and let the user purchase directly from the feature-specific paywall. And so we built this like feature-specific paywall where you could purchase directly there, but as opposed to taking the user to another place where they pay, you could purchase right there, right in the experience. Now there was like debate about what should be the copy, what should be the color, like should this arrow be bigger? But the main thing that we were testing is taking that step out of the purchase flow, that extra step of clicking. And so we said, hey, you know what, like the copy is good enough, the UI is good enough, let's test this flow change to see if this is gonna make a real impact. And so that's how we were able to kind of say, look, let's not iterate anymore on this copy and just move forward and test it. And we can iterate again on this paywall as well. And so we really cut out a lot of the time in moving forward with this experiment. And so the other benefit of A/B testing is it fosters continuous learning. So you run your experiment, win or lose, but you learn something from it, and then the learnings from that experiment can then drive your next experiment. By having A/B testing, you also gain the ability to convince other people that, hey, it's an experiment. We'll test it, we'll get the results. And as opposed to people saying, oh, I don't believe, I strongly disagree. Well, you can test it and measure the results, right? Let the data speak for itself. So A/B testing is great for all of the above mentioned reasons, but there are many cons that you should be aware of before A/B testing. For one, it takes longer to build it than it does to test it. Right? When you build out an A/B experiment, you have to feature flag it. Ideally, you have some A/B testing tool that you've integrated with to run your A/B tests. This takes time. There's a lot of upfront planning as well. You have to think, which I'll get into in terms of like how to set up an A/B experiment. But when you're doing A/B testing, you want to make sure you know what you're going to measure. And a lot of times you don't actually have the metrics that you want to measure. So you need to make sure you instrument those metrics. And then the upfront planning comes into play because if you run an experiment, realize you're missing a key analytic event that you want to measure, well, now you have to stop the experiment. Add that analytical event and then restart your test. So there is a lot of upfront planning involved in this. Another con is a lot of confusion for QA, for dev, support when you're testing. You've got these multiple experiences. maybe just one variant and then the control. But you might be doing like a multivariant test and you have like 3 different versions. So it can be a little complicated for support and for QA, right? In our company, actually, we don't build automated test cases for our variant until we decide that it wins, because that's kind of throwaway work for our AQA team. So there's like a gap in your automated testing as well. And so you have to support these different variants. And so it does take extra work there. And then finally, couple more points. So code cleanup. Once you finish your experiment, you have your variant that wins or doesn't win, you want to clean up your craft, right? So you don't want to have this lingering code that might slow down the app performance. So you have to clean it up, and it may be well after the developers have implemented the changes. And so there's like a bit of a catch-up learning curve of touching that code base again. And then sometimes you run an experiment and all you can see is the data, which is great. You can see the data speaks for itself, but what the data doesn't tell you is the why. You may see an increase in engagement or a decrease in purchase conversion or what have you, but that's all you see, the data, and you don't understand the why. Like, why are users purchasing less? Don't know, right? All you can see is the data, the user behavior, the metrics that you're tracking. And so you may need to have follow-up user research and interviews to better understand the why. And then one last thing is it can take a while to get your results when it comes to measuring retention. If you have a monthly subscription, you do have to let it run for a while. Okay, I'm gonna try to hurry up a little. Designing effective A/B tests. So the first thing that you're gonna do is come up with a good hypothesis. And so typically this pattern is, if I do this, then this thing will happen, I'll get this outcome because of some reasons, like if, then, because. Now that if, then, because kind of statement follows these bullet points here. You start with an evidence-based problem. And so it's important that it is evidence-based. You cannot just make up some hypothesis. You really want to have it backed by something like user research, the data, interviews, customer support tickets, right? Like you have some evidence-backed hypothesis. Then you come up with some idea, some proposal to the solution. You predict that, okay, if based off of this problem, we will make this change and get this new outcome. And then you have some reasoning for why you're going to get that outcome. And most importantly, you want to make sure that this experiment aligns with your business goals, some business metric, right? So a couple of examples here. So in like this one example, we see that users are going to the website and they're just not clicking the button to purchase, right? Like, they're just not clicking it for whatever reason. We see that the evidence is in the data. We look at the user behavior, the user click action, right? So the solution is the CTA wasn't prominent enough. It's too disguised by the color scheme of all of the other copy. And so let's change that color to make it stand out and look more differentiated. And so the prediction is this will increase the purchase click-through rate. And the reason is because the users will be able to more easily see the button. And then you run your experiment and you measure the results and let the data speak for itself. And then if you win, if your variant wins, roll it out. If it loses, you experiment again. Here's one more example. There was this account creation flow that we had with onboarding and account creation. So we asked the user all of these questions, and at the very end we said, now sign up and create an account, right? We saw that there was a huge drop-off in the onboarding flow. As we were asking the questions, there was a drop-off. And then people didn't complete onboarding, they didn't create an account. And so we noticed that the high drop-off point was in the screen where we were asking for child information, like the date of birth. And so we had interviews, we realized that users did not want to give this kind of sensitive information. So we proposed a solution to put the account creation, the secure login, before, in the beginning of the flow. And that way we would have more account creation completion rate with onboarding. And so the prediction was increased top of the funnel account creation and conversion. And the reason was users were afraid to give sensitive information that's not tied behind login. And so it actually ended up being a success. And so this was like another example of a good experiment. And so we just changed that to have the account creation at the very front. So the next thing you want to do is identify your key metrics. So what is the primary metric that you're trying to move? Like this can be conversion rate, retention rate. This is basically what you're trying to move the needle on. And then secondary metrics are things that will help give you indicators of that metric. So that might be time on page or click-through rate, or because retention takes time, it might be some kind of indicator of retention. So that might be like app engagement, app session open, or depending upon what your app is, if it's a tracking app, it might be logging engagement. And then you want to have counter metrics. So you want to focus on the good, you hope things will move up, but you may want to look at some counter metrics as well. So in this example, there is this hypothesis that the value tour, a couple of screens that you see before you get to sign up, that these were getting in the way of account creation. So the hypothesis was by making those screens optional, by putting it into a carousel and just making that get started button prominent right there on the page without clicking, without having to scroll through images, that we would increase account creation. And so actually we ran this test, we did get more account creation, but my counter metric was app engagement, and we noticed that app engagement went down. And so it's always important to have a counter metric to make sure you're not doing any other harm. So you may be moving the metric that you want, but make sure that you're not having any other negative effects. And then you want to have your exit criteria. So what is the current performance of your metric that you're trying to move, and then what's your target? And then gauge statistical significance. So you don't want to run an experiment if you're not going to ever reach stat sig. If you're touching some part of the app that really has low traffic, you're never going to reach stat sig, right? So make sure that it's something that has enough traffic that you can get to confidence with statistical significance. So these are just like two examples, two links of some tools that I use to gauge statistical significance. There's plenty available though, like if you just do a Google search, you can probably find other tools. Okay, so summary, you start with a good hypothesis. You make sure you have your metrics, primary, counter, maybe even have lagging indicators, and then gauge your statistical significance, your sample size that you want to achieve. And so now I'll go into best practices and common pitfalls, and I did not realize how long I was taking, but you want to think about the timing. There's seasonality, there's holidays and promos, and that changes your user behavior. And so you want to coordinate with the timing of running your experiment. You don't want to run multiple experiments that have the same primary metric as well, because they will compete with each other. And you won't be able to know which one is making the lift, right? Short test duration. I know it's very easy to peek and look and see, oh, this has statistical significance, or this is like making a positive trend. But you do want to let it run for at least a week. In a past experience, I noticed that I had 85% statistical significance. I thought it was a clear win, but on the weekend, it changed, it flipped. And so you do want to let it run, I mean, especially if the volume is very low, like percent conversion out of 100 users. Like when you compare the two, the volume is low, but maybe the difference is high, right? So you do want to let it run for at least like a week. Focusing on vanity metrics. So if you focus on metrics that aren't actually going to help the business, that's like a common pitfall. So you want to make sure that you have the right metrics in play. Uneven distribution. Okay. This is only really going to happen when you have low volume in your A/B experiments. If it cannot be helped that you have low volume, then what you want to do is take a look a little further at the data. Make sure that you're looking at the users by different cohorts. And then look out for long-term effects. So short-term gains may not always translate to long-term benefits. And so if there is a concern that your change is just a short-term black hat gain, right? Like, oh, quick win now, but then later it has negative effects long-term, you could consider having a follow-up, like you run your experiment, you think it's a winner, but maybe you run another experiment, this is what I did, with a 10% holdout group. That's a long-running holdout group to measure the long-term effects. And then insufficient sample size, if you run the experiment with too few participants, you won't really get like your good learnings. Final tip, I think I went over. But final tip is it's okay to fail as long as you've learned something from it. So I think somebody else said 50% of experiments fail, and that's okay. You just want to make sure that you're learning something from it. And then A/B tests are not a one and done. They're iterative, they're compounded, the learnings are compounded. I've run so many tests, like iterative tests on the onboarding flow, right? We got a test, we got a win, let's try to squeeze more juice out of it. We had a test that failed, but the problem is still there. So let's iterate on that and then run another test. So every test comes with the learning, and that learning may be your next hypothesis. So I'll finally end with any time that's left for Q&A. I think none. Sorry, but thank you. You can come to me after for any questions.